to The Married Therapist,
a relationship podcast
hosted by us, Luis and Amber Simide.
This podcast is all about love, conflict, and the gray areas.
If you like what you hear, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening. Now let's get to the show.
Hi guys, welcome back to our podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about redefining commitment and relationship structures. So there's monogamous relationships, there's ethical non-monogamous relationships, something called relationship anarchy that I just heard about, and just kind of overall relationship expectations, like what works, how do couples define the structure and whatnot. So as always, I want to start out by us talking about what we witnessed growing up. So for you, growing up, what did the relationships look like? What was kind of the worldview when it came to maybe some of the other non-traditional types of relationships?
For me, growing up in a Hispanic household, it was very traditional in the way that we saw relationships. It was always between a man and a woman, and that's just the way things were. I didn't really know any different, right? So like the idea that homosexual relationships could happen or polyamorous relationships could happen, that wasn't even in my mind, right? So I just saw heterosexual relationships as what a relationship is. So that was really the only framework I had to work from. And I did at some point hear about people with multiple wives, and I always thought they were just these crazy outlandish people, or maybe even like in biblical times that happened, but it doesn't really happen anymore. But
do you mean like polygamous?
Yeah, so polygamists, I knew that there were examples of that in the Bible, but I didn't think that happened today. And if they did happen, it was like this offshoot of these wild, crazy people that are just so different and out of this world. So that was just how I grew up, and that's just what I saw.
I'm curious, did you ever think that heterosexual monogamous relationships were the gold standard? Like they were better than others, or no?
I don't know if I even saw like a hierarchy. I really just saw it as like normal relationships. It's not necessarily better, but this is what normal is, and everything else is abnormal and not a thing that happens. So I didn't necessarily rank them because it's almost like I didn't even acknowledge the other ones as relationships, really. So yeah, there really was nothing to rank for me.
Okay.
Yeah. What about you? Like how are things growing up for you?
Same. A relationship is comprised between a cis man and a cis woman who are monogamous. But what's very interesting is that there are so many people who cheat.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly these heterosexual men and the relationship that I just described. That always boggled my mind. That this is the norm, this is the standard, because I was raised like that, especially because I was born and raised in the church. This is what everyone should be. But a little bit of a disconnect because it doesn't seem like this cis kind of hetero man is happy, because if he was, he wouldn't be stepping out on his girlfriend or his wife all the time. So riddle me that.
Yeah, I'm saying obviously I knew that people cheated, but I didn't think anything beyond that. I just thought these are relationships. Sometimes people cheat. The end. So yeah, I never really gave it much more thought.
Okay. So fast forward, we're in present day. You've been exposed to all different types of relationships. There are some people who are polyamorous, some people who say they're swingers, some people in an ethical, non-monogamous relationship, some people who are even polygamous because of maybe the religious system that they're raised in. So how do you make sense of that? Is that something that's still kind of foreign? Did it take a second to process, or is that, oh, okay, you felt like you could kind of easily accept that?
As I started to learn about them, it definitely was still a challenge for me because, again, I had no context for this. I always thought it was this abnormal thing. But again, I started to learn about them and start to see that they're people just like everyone else. And they have these preferences, and it doesn't necessarily make them bad or good. It just makes them different. And really starting to see that there were people who agreed to this lifestyle. And so if they agreed to it, who am I to say that it's wrong that they're doing this, right? It's not something that I subscribe to because of my values, my beliefs, and how I'm wired. But that doesn't mean that the way I'm wired and believe is right. or wrong. It's just different. And so it really was kind of late 20s, early 30s, and like in grad school when I started to see some of this play out a little bit. There was a girl, I had a sex therapy class, and there was a girl in there who specialized in polyamorous relationships. And as she started to express that and express what she did and kind of where her passions lied, I really started to see like, wow, like this is a whole community of people that are often underrepresented. And unfortunately, there is a stigma, right, behind that, because a lot of people think the way that I did when I was a kid, or even my early 20s, like they're just these weirdo people or these like sexually deviant people. When the reality is they're just people consenting to this lifestyle, and that's what it is, right? And so again, there's no right or wrong way to do that. It's just different, and that's not wrong.
I love what you shared about it just being different and not right or wrong, because I share that a lot in my
Hmm.
practice. I'm
Yeah.
like, you're not good, that person's not bad. You're not right, that person's not wrong. Now, there are some specific situations where we could say that, but overwhelmingly, when it comes to
Mhm.
relational dynamics, sometimes it's misalignment. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's just not a vibe. It's just not a match, and that's okay. And kind of having that cognitive reframe really helps a lot of people because
Hmm.
we are all so used to thinking and feeling in the binary
Right.
with everything. It's either right or it's either wrong, these kind of
Hmm.
absolute truths. And so that's cool that you're sharing all of that. I learned some of the same stuff in grad school. Like,
Hmm.
hold on, let's go ahead and not side eye this community just because it's different.
Hmm.
Because oftentimes things that feel different are scary.
Yeah.
It's a threat, but it's an opportunity to uncover that.
To learn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like why do I feel threatened by these group of people who have nothing to do with me half the time?
Right.
It's fear of the unknown. You don't
Hmm.
really know what's going on. So you
Yeah.
know what? Maybe you could go ahead and ask them questions. Maybe you can do a little bit of research so you can get a better understanding of it.
Hmm. Yeah. And I love that. I love that both of us kind of have that mindset where again, it's not a matter of what is right and what's wrong, but what do we not know and how can we learn more about it? And the more you learn, the more you just really learn more about humanity and learn to accept how people are and learn to accept differences. I think that's really the definition of being a tolerant society, of just understanding, not necessarily agreeing one way or the other, like this is the way to live life, but understanding that people have preferences that are different than yours, and that doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them different, and we're all different in different ways, right? So I think we get stuck in the dominant being the correct thing when that's not reality.
That has been shown time over time
Yeah.
in our society.
Hmm. Yeah. The dominant thing tends to get precedence as the quote unquote right thing. You see that with race, you see that with gender, like you see that with a lot of different things. Like the thing that you see most prevalent is the thing that takes priority and the thing that gets the most privilege, right? Because there's less things to work through. Like there is privilege in being in a heteronormative relationship, right? There are privileges to being like married even in our 30s, right? So the thing that tends to be abnormal, the thing that doesn't fall into what is considered the dominant thing, oftentimes gets ostracized, or people point to it as like this is a wrong thing or this is a bad thing. And it's like, no, everyone lives their life. Everyone has a life that is right to them. And that's all it is. It's their life.
Yeah, we talk a lot about social constructs.
Hmm.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
A group of people agreed that this one way of thinking or this one way of living is right.
Hmm.
But then it changes.
Yeah.
So then, okay, now, 100 years later,
Yeah. It's very different.
like gay people can get married in our day and age.
Hmm.
100 years ago, that was absolutely not okay. That was frowned upon.
Yeah.
So, from a historical standpoint, what do we do about that? How do we make sense of that?
Hmm.
So many people ride so hard for a certain thing,
Hmm.
which makes sense according to their value system, according to their religious beliefs, or just kind of general worldview. But it's just, again, an opportunity to sit back and be like, okay, this is what I believe, but let me not judge other people
Hmm.
because that person is different than me.
Yeah.
Again, tomorrow, next week, next year, some of our policies can change. And that hill that you were dying on no longer is what the vast majority believes.
Yeah.
So, on one hand, it could be kind of tough to conceptualize because things are ever changing. But on another hand, I think it is an opportunity to really be more open and understanding and compassionate to people who are different than you.
Yeah, 100%. We fear the things that we don't know. We fear the things that are different. We fear change. And so we try to stay the same in everything that we do. We try to stay the same as society. And so you see so many examples throughout history, adults just saying the next generation is doomed because they're doing things differently than we did, right? It's like, no, they're not doomed. You were a generation that did things differently than your parents' generation did, and you are fine, right? Like everyone changes, every generation has their thing.
Right.
Every generation changes with time and with culture, and that's not an inherently bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're always evolving.
Yes.
So I have a question. When it comes to someone who is in a polyamorous relationship or ethical non-monogamy, how do you think it could work? Because I know a lot of people are probably thinking that could never work. No way. There's a reason why the dominant relational status is monogamous,
Hmm.
but it does work for people. But
Yeah.
how do you think they're able to have success there?
Yeah, and I think to that point, it does work for people, and you see examples of that throughout the animal kingdom, right? There are so many examples of species that are not monogamous species, and so to say that it's not natural, it's like, who's to say what's natural and what's not natural, right? Like it's just because it's what's common doesn't mean it's what's right.
And the
But
divorce rate is,
astronomical.
I feel like it's always been 50%
Yeah,
at this point.
yeah.
Maybe it's even higher. So again, how's that working for you?
Yeah. But no, I think it can work. It requires communication first and foremost, right? The people who are agreeing to be in this relationship all need to be in communication with each other, all need to set expectations of like what they are agreeing to and really be aware, be on the same page with that. Because if you have and I've seen this as an example, like if you have one person in a relationship saying that they are polyamorous or they believe in polygamy and all of that, and the other person being monogamous, that probably won't work out, right? Because the person that's monogamous will just see the other person as they're just wanting to cheat, which they wouldn't be wrong, in that scenario. But if you're both agreeing to this polyamorous relationship and agreeing to have multiple partners, and then you do that, you're not going to be surprised when it happens. One of the things that I tell the kids that I work with all the time, and some of the parents too, is when you have this expectation of what you think should be happening versus what reality is, that distance right between expectations and reality is where a lot of disappointment, resentment, anger, just all of that comes from. And so when you bring it closer to each other, when you bring expectations closer to what your reality is, there's less disappointment, right? There's less to be angry about because you knew that it was going to happen, right? So if you are wanting to be in this polyamorous relationship and you get with people who are also with that same mindset, that expectation is closer to what your reality will likely be. So, it does take a lot of communication and it takes being honest upfront. I think if you're on a dating site, I think you should disclose that pretty quickly, that that's what you are looking for,
Yes.
because you would hate for it to be like 5 months down the line and then you're sleeping around with other people. And the other person's like, what's happening? I'm like, oh, I'm polyamorous. Like, oh, that would have been nice to know, 5 months ago.
Oh my gosh. Which I'm sure happens way more than
Yeah.
we can all imagine.
Yeah. And then the polyamorous person just feeling like it's not wrong. And it's like, you're not wrong. Like, it's not wrong inherently, but to not disclose that to someone who doesn't agree with that, that's what's wrong. Right. So, but yeah, I'm sure it happens all the time.
Them thinking they're slick.
Yeah.
But I know some people may be thinking, well, how would I know? This is a great opportunity to do some self-discovery,
Yeah.
to be introspective, to really dig deep, get a journal, maybe that has some journal prompts where you can
Hmm.
ask questions. Of course, going to therapy is always going to be our answer
Yeah.
for most things. And as you were talking, another thing that came to mind that I think could be helpful for someone is to think about how things were growing up. What did you witness
Yeah.
when it came to relationships? A lot of times people maybe had parents that fought all the time. They didn't have a great connection. So that person's like, I don't want to settle down. I don't want to get married because that equates to instability. That's scary. That's unsafe.
Hmm.
Yuck. Okay. Valid.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems like that was maybe a traumatic upbringing. If you're witnessing your parents fighting all the time, you hiding in your room, that's happened to so many people in my personal life and in my practice where, yeah, 100% understand why that's not the path that you want to go down. Now, of course, I would say, okay, you could do some work there so you can
Yeah.
get some relief. But at the end of the day, maybe you do go to therapy and you still are like, I don't really want to ever commit to anyone on that level. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can go ahead and tell people that when you're dating. What a lot of people don't do is truly figure out what works for them. Because on
Mm-hmm.
the flip side of things, there are people who deeply value a monogamous
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Yeah.
And that's you and I.
Yeah.
We find a lot of joy and a lot of peace and comfort and safety in that.
Mm-hmm.
And we communicate that with one another. We both agreed in alignment. So that works for us.
Yeah.
So everybody has to go on their own journey as an adult to figure out what makes sense. And I would say too, like pay attention to the things that kind of spark your interest in music and TV, movies. Is there some kind of a lifestyle that you're like, ooh, I want that?
Mm-hmm.
That's saying something.
Yeah.
So collect that data.
Yeah, and to your point, I think it does take a lot of introspection because you can be someone who truly does value polygamy or polyamory, but you're not aware of it. And so you get into the relationships and you're constantly getting that itch to cheat. You're gonna hurt a lot of people because if you are cosplaying as this monogamous person, but that's not really who you are, you're going to be hurting yourself and hurting a lot of other people along the way. So I think it really does take you understanding yourself, understanding how you're wired, and understanding like what is going to bring you the most joy and satisfaction out of your life, because you don't want to string people along into this journey that isn't authentic to who you are.
Yeah. And there's a lot of cheaters who
Hmm.
would say, I just cheat. That's who I am.
Yeah.
It's just
Like,
what I do.
yeah.
Like it's some kind of cancer
Yeah.
coursing through their veins and they can't control it. And that's not true.
Hmm.
Again, it's very layered, very nuanced. Great opportunity to go to therapy to unpack that. But for that person who doesn't want to cheat,
Hmm.
maybe let's pause. Let's not be in a relationship or let's take a break to understand that. Because there are people like that who are fine and maybe that person can transition from a monogamous relationship to a polyamorous relationship. But I'm speaking to the person who kind of feels like it's more ego dystonic. They don't want to be like that.
Hmm.
Okay, let's dive deep, but you got to really invest in yourself
Yeah.
to uncover that. Because what happens is a lot of times they don't do that. And then they're hurting that person, and the person they're cheating on internalizes it, thinking it's something that I said or I did.
Hmm.
And it can just be this vicious cycle that goes round and round.
Yeah, being cheated on is a pretty traumatic experience, and we've seen it time and time again come up in all these dating shows that we watch, how it affects them going forward in relationships and how they trust people, how they show up in a relationship and all of that. And as you were talking about, the person who says like, I can't help it, I'm gonna cheat, I thought about Clay from Love is Blind, right? With AD. He's just like, that's just who I am. Like I'm probably gonna, it's like maybe monogamous relationships aren't for you, sir. Or maybe they're just some things you have to work on for both things are true, right? But yeah, be honest with yourself and with everyone else around you.
So we're talking all about social constructs, the need to communicate, figuring out what your values are. So I'm just curious, how can couples differentiate between an agreement versus a traditional expectation? What needs to happen?
Yeah, I think just like you said, everything's a social construct, right? There are no quote unquote rules to relationships. It really is whatever you and your partner agree on, right? That's all that matters because we can get so caught up in doing what is quote unquote right and what we've seen happen that we don't really evaluate what we really believe, what we truly value, and we will just go based on what we've seen, right? Like what's traditional and what's normal and what our parents expect, what our friends expect. And so I think it really does take communication, like we talked about, of you and your partner really exploring like what is important to you guys as a couple. Like what's important to you as an individual, but then more importantly, what's important to you guys as a couple and how you guys are going to live your life. Because it can look wildly different than what is traditionally quote unquote accepted. Or it could look very, very traditional. Like there's no right or wrong way to do this. But I think a lot of couples get trapped in this idea that things have to look traditional when they don't. They can look however you want it to look. And yeah, so I think it takes communication and introspection as a couple. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and there's this concept called relationship anarchy that speaks about how there doesn't have to be a hierarchy when it comes to relationships. And also, relationships that are platonic are on the same level as relationships that
Hmm.
are familial or romantic. So, if you subscribe to that, I think that's really important to take into your next partnership,
Hmm.
because maybe you're the type of person who has two really solid relationships with your coworkers. You really love them. You spend a lot of time, energy, and effort on those relationships. But the person that you get with, it's like, well, those are just your coworkers.
Hmm.
Why are you always going to lunch with them? Or why are you always on the phone with them? That's a value for you.
Hmm.
So maybe you don't know that about yourself. So finding terms like that, and this is coming from a relationship philosophy that's been around for about 20 years, could be really helpful.
Hmm.
So we're saying the same thing over and over again in a bit of a different way, but the point is to just let people know that you can do whatever you want to
Yeah.
do when it comes to your life.
Yeah, because I know for you and me, like our most important relationship is a relationship that we have with each other, right? Like we don't value our friendships over our relationship or even our families over our relationship. And so I think a lot of people don't have that same mindset. And again, that doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just different. And I think it's important that you and your partner are aware of what that is and are aligned in that. If you value the relationship more than any other relationship, but your partner values friendships over the relationship, there's going to be a lot of conflict, right? And so I think, again, it just takes communication and knowing what you truly value. And again, not seeing it as right or wrong, just different and letting that be okay.
That reminded me of when you were married and you were living out of San Antonio, a couple
Hmm.
hours away, but you had to come to San Antonio for school. And once you were done with that, you visited a couple friends, and your ex-wife did not like that. She said,
Yeah.
you came to San Antonio for school and school only, you need to come back. And that was really wild. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, yeah. So like you said, I came down here for internship and I was here for a couple days. And then on the way back, I was gonna stop for lunch with a couple friends of mine. I told her, I was like, hey, I'll be back a little bit later. I'm having lunch with these friends. And she was pissed. She was just like, you didn't go down there to hang out with friends. Like you need to be up here with us. We're doing things up here, but for her, she didn't really value friendships at all. I don't know if that's because she didn't have any friends or it's just it wasn't a value of hers. I don't know. But my friendships are really important to me. And I think that was a disconnect, right? And I think for her, she saw it as a bad thing that I had friends or a bad thing that I put effort into those friendships because in her mind, like family is the only thing that matters. Your friends, they don't matter. So why are you hanging out? It's like a foreign concept to her. And I think that's probably how she was raised too. So, I mean, it is what it is. But I think, again, everyone has a different perspective on different relationships and the value they place in them. And I'm going to reiterate this with everything. It doesn't make it wrong. It's just different than than yourself. And that's okay.
That just reminds me of something that I went through when I was married. I remember every single phone call that him and I had to be on speaker because the other person needed to be a part of it. I wanted to have my own phone calls,
Hmm.
or at the time I was sending Marco Polo videos to someone. He always wanted to be in it. When it came to his life, I was like, no, you go in the room, you talk to whoever it is. I don't need to be there all the time. I don't mind every now and then being there, but I'm kind of the type that's just like, oh, you're on the phone with a friend, hi, and that's it.
Hmm.
But he was just like, no, we're married, we're one, so we need to present ourselves as a unit to everyone. So I remember I was sending these Marco Polos to a friend for a while before I met him. And then all of a sudden, after I met him, every single video he was in it, if not fully for a significant period of time. It was so incredibly suffocating. It felt like I didn't have an identity
Hmm.
at all. Whoever Amber was before that, that person ceased to exist.
Yeah.
So that was just wild. And I'm so grateful that I'm out of that because, again, that didn't really feel good to
Hmm.
me to be a part of that kind of a dynamic.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that you experienced that because I know how important your friendships are to you, and I can't imagine how that was for you to like not really have that anymore, and just one being more isolated, but then every time you did have an interaction with them, it was you and him, so you no longer had this one-on-one relationship that you love, and so that sucks that you would do
Yes, it did.
that.
Okay. So now we're going to get into a Reddit relationship dilemma that speaks about this topic. The title is it possible to compromise between monogamy and non-monogamy? I know that this question in itself sounds a little silly, as anything that goes outside of your typical exclusive one partner relationship would be considered non-monogamous. However, I see a lot of people on here harshly discourage couples staying together where one leans more towards monogamy and one leans more towards non monogamy. People say that it's too incompatible and that they both should just find people who want that relationship style. What about people who are married or in long term monogamous relationships where everything else about the relationship is good, but one partner discovers that they are leaning towards or developing an interest in non monogamy? Is it possible to compromise? Is there some sort of negotiable middle ground? For example, the partner that leans more towards monogamy is interested in potentially having group sex, but the partner who leans towards non monogamy wants group sex in addition to one or two sexual partners outside of that to explore their sexuality. Neither of them want polyamory slash more emotional or romantic relationships than just with each other. Just curious if anyone thinks it is possible to bridge this type of gap. I understand that we all want everyone to be their authentic selves and not have to sacrifice too much for our partners. But I think in almost any relationship, even if people are ethical non monogamous, there is still compromise involved. Or maybe one person wants more freedom, people's definitions and boundaries are different, etc.
Yeah, that's hard because it sounds like it started out as monogamous, like both were on the same page about being monogamous, but later on someone discovered that they were more non-monogamous. That would be really hard, honestly. I feel like it would take a lot more for the monogamous person to really evaluate if that's something that they're willing to accept, right? Like if they think that they love this person and that their love is secure enough that they can allow this person to be non-monogamous, if they communicate and they have that expectation, I could see it working potentially. But I could also see it too, where this person who's discovering that they're non-monogamous, I don't know, like I think it's hard as someone who is fiercely monogamous to not want that person who's non-monogamous to kind of stay monogamous for the sake of the relationship, right? Because it almost in my mind it feels selfish that okay, well I'm discovering that I'm a non-monogamous, so I have to explore this part even though you are monogamous. Like that feels selfish to me, but I know inherently it's not. So I think it really just depends on if both people are willing to accept the other part of themselves and manage those expectations. But I think it'll be really hard for that to work out long term. What about you?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it from a clinical perspective. If this person were my client, I would ask a lot of questions.
Hmm.
You feel like you're leaning towards that. Tell me why. When did you first start feeling like this? Is there anyone around you who has this kind of lifestyle that you think is really cool? Was there a song or a movie or a show that you saw that really piqued your interest? And let's uncover that.
Hmm.
Because if you want to do this, you can do it, but there are natural consequences to our actions. Because for this person, they are in a monogamous relationship.
Hmm.
So after a lot of exploration, if they're like, yes, Amber, I want to do it. Okay. Have a conversation with your partner, present all that data to them, and see what happens. Again, there's a huge chance they're not going to be okay with it. And if
Hmm.
that's what happens, you got to know that maybe the relationship will end.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I'm sure it's going to be very difficult on many levels. And maybe that's exactly what you need in
Hmm.
order to pivot and live your authentic life. On the other hand, maybe when you present that data to your partner, they'll receive it.
Hmm.
They'll be okay with it. Maybe wholeheartedly, maybe they'll be cautiously optimistic. Who knows? But it doesn't have to mean that your relationship will end.
Yeah.
But the point is being honest. But how do you be honest if you don't know what's going on? That's why you got to be introspective.
Yeah, and I think the onus would be on the person who is leaning towards non-monogamy to let the person who is monogamous let them know before you step out, right? Because it would be one thing to like step out, be in another relationship, or have sex with someone else, and then come back and be like, "Hey, I did this, but I've been leaning towards non-monogamy. So what are your thoughts?"
Yes,
Like
I
that's
know that's a big thing.
yeah,
Cheaters get caught, and then
yeah.
they're like, I wasn't cheating. I was just being my polyamorous, authentic self.
It's like, well, this is news to me because I thought we were in a monogamous relationship.
Yes. So if you're listening, don't do that.
No, do not. And I think too, if I was working with the person who is monogamous, I would ask that person, like, one, would you be okay with this person exploring their non-monogamous life? And if you were, what would you need in order to feel safe in this relationship?
Yes.
I think that would be really important for that person who's monogamous to really flesh out and to know. Because if they can't think of anything, if they will always feel unsafe, that would be the indication that it's not going to work out. But if they would just need more affirmation from their partner, or if they would just need to meet the person that, whatever they need to feel safe, I think they would need to explore that and to communicate to their partner.
Yeah, exactly. Because for a lot of us, when we think of getting with other people, we think it's deeply emotional and things like that. But there are people where they don't believe in that. It is
Hmm.
just physical. So if the person who's monogamous is like, well, I guess what I need is just to know that it's a rando.
Hmm.
It's just this fantasy maybe, or this thing we do when we're traveling,
Yeah.
then I'll be okay with it because I know that they're coming home to me, because I know that they're committed to me and what
Mm.
we've got going on. But yeah, this is all great things for couples therapy.
Yes.
And there are specific couples therapists who specialize in this.
Hmm.
So I would not go to a regular couples therapist because they're just simply not going to know.
Yeah.
So just like it's important to go to a trauma therapist if you've got issues with trauma you want to process, or if you've got this eating disorder, you want to go to an eating disorder
Hmm.
therapist. So I want to just speak to that.
Yeah, there's a lot of correlation to the medical system, right? So if you have a heart issue, you're not going to go to a podiatrist, right? Like you should go to a cardiologist. And in the same way, if you have an issue surrounding this idea of non-monogamy, they do have people who specialize in non-monogamous relationships. And so we've mentioned psychology today before and ways to find a therapist. That is one of the filters that you can put, like non-monogamous relationships and go that route. So that's it for this Reddit story in this episode. If you or someone you know has a relationship dilemma that you are experiencing or that you just know of that someone else is experiencing, feel free to email us at semidaysquad@gmail.com and we can answer those here on our podcast. If you do, we will keep it anonymous. We will not put names. And if anything, we'll just put a random name if a name is necessary. But do that. We would love to explore those relationship dilemmas with you. But until then, we'll continue to do Reddit relationships. We enjoy doing this, but we would love to do some of your relationship dilemmas as well.
Thank you guys so much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all the things. We appreciate it. We'd love to hear your thoughts too on this topic because we don't have all the answers, as we say often, but we will see you guys in the next episode. Take care.
Later.